My name is Moroz. I'm a 25-year retiree from this station. I originated here about 1945, and I took my apprentice work at this very seat that I'm sitting at here right now. And the agent was kind enough to show me the Morse code, and I got my beginnings in this station in Smoky Lake. And I went on to a 40-year career working stations and doing telegraph business for the Northern Alberta Railways, the Canadian Pacific Railway, and the Canadian National Railways. And my career was most interesting. I enjoyed every minute of my 40 years, and I'm enjoying my 20-year retirement. That's the way we send telegrams. That's the way we communicated 50, 60 years ago. Everything was by this Morse code on the railroad. This is the electrical circuit breaker that produced the dots and dashes. Okay, this is a sound box that amplified the breaking of the circuit by magnetism. It made the sound dots and dashes wherever you broke on the key. You could differentiate between the pauses as to dots and dashes. The worst messages, fatalities, death, notifications, happy announcements, births of babies, their weight, and the time and the date. Those are the happies. Wrecks would be the bad information you'd get. Weather reports, we had to send weather reports, all from each individual station. Grain reports, we notified Montreal and all the shipping points about the expected crop, grains, etc. Message would come in on this sound box here, but first of all you would hear it on a relay that I have on the other office. We had about 15 relays in here, just like 15 different phone lines, and you'd have to pick out your own call, like SM for Smoky Lake. So you'd pick out the wire that it was coming on over there, and we had a switch to transfer that small noise onto this big noise to read it from this sound box, and then we would transcribe it by teletype onto the telegram, to the telegram form. And I learnt my typing in Wetaskiwin, in Smoky Lake, from George Kalataluk was the teacher then. And the beginning of my typing carried me on for 45 years. And I copied thousands of messages, learning how to type, listening to that noise. Messages, if they were for the business people over town, we had a messenger boy to deliver the messages, the telegrams. If they were for country points, we would phone them out. If they were death messages, they asked us to deliver them personally. And that's the way communication started in this country. That's quite a long time back. Very many death messages. During the war, we copied hundreds of regret to advise messages, yeah. And there were also hundreds of births that we communicated to various stations along the line and to different parts of Canada. So-and-so was a happy mother, just this baby was born today, such and such a time, so much weight. And then we'd get 6 or 7 congratulatory messages, which added to our business. So it was a two-way affair. We'd send the message advising about the birth, and then we looked forward to receiving at least a dozen congratulatory messages. Controlled the train order board above the station. When you had this board with this lever in this position, that board was clear. That arm would be straight up over top of the station. If you wanted to caution the train to pick up train orders or messages, you'd put it in a caution display, which is a 45. And this would be about a caution display. And if the train had real urgent orders, this would be across the track indicating he had to stop before he proceeded beyond that board and pick up his further instructions and train orders. Okay, this is when we had a message for a train. We'd copy it by code, print it on this piece of paper, fold it up like this, and slip it into the hoop like that, and then hand it up to the train. And the engineer or the fireman, as the train went by, he put his hand through there and he grabbed that message and he took the message and threw the hoop out by the track for the agent to pick up again. That's the way we delivered messages to trains. Oh yes, and if the train conductor or the train engineer liked you, he'd make a fast job of taking his message and throw the thing before the end of the platform. If you were in bad terms and you yanked his arm or didn't let go of the hoop soon enough, you were liable to go down about a mile down the track to pick this thing up and bring it back to the station. You had to keep on good terms and leave this very light in your hand at the moment they were picking it up, so you wouldn't jerk his hand. This was the greeting point. This is where anybody wanting to ship any parcel or communicate with anybody all over the world, this is where you come to get the information. I want to send a telegram to my son who is in Australia. My son is in Europe. He's broke. He needs money. You'd come to the station and you'd want to wire $20 to this poor kid in Europe. You'd come to the station to do it. The banks, they'd look for several sacks of money to come in by train. It would all come in by train. The money was delivered from the train to the station agent, and the people from the bank would come to the station and pick up their bags of money and bags of silver. And that's the way the money got to Smoky Lake. This is the station waiting room where the passengers got off the train and come in here to wait for their pickup by horse and buggy, or else you waited here for the train to pick you up to take you to Edmonton. It was always fired by a coal or wood stove, kept you nice and warm and comfortable while you were waiting. Okay. This was the station agent's living room, this part here. His kitchen was over there, his bedrooms were upstairs. And this was a little dining room where you have your camera there. And this was the agent's office. No one else was allowed in there. That was strictly a private office because there was cash involved, there were money orders there, the safe was there with the money. No one else was allowed to come into that office except the agent. This was the idea of a resident station agent where they had to have round-the-clock service on trains, so they required someone to be available at any time. So they really wanted to have a resident station agent where they could be called at any time of the day or night to give train orders or copy messages. See, this is the upstairs residence part of your typical station agent. Usually there were 3 bedrooms and a little storage closet. This would be 2 bedrooms in here, which you've now made into an art gallery. Beautiful plastered job, nice and warm up here in the winter time. All heated by coal furnaces. Original flooring, original doorknobs. These are antiques now. Surprisingly, I never did live in the station. The wife didn't want to live in the station. It was too cramped. So we usually had a home over town. It used to cost $5 a month off your paycheck as residence rent for a station agent. $5 a month. Coal was free. Your lights were free. They charged you $5 to live in a station residence. This is the baggage freight door where we unloaded freight from the train into the station where it was heated in the summer, in the winter time, so your produce wouldn't freeze. And that little door there was the coal bin where the coal was stored for the operation of the coal stove in the station to keep the heating room warm for passengers. Okay.
So your dad came from?
My dad came from Ukraine, yeah, as a boy, 17 years old, and he got his job on the section along with the other immigrants, and he progressed to the point of section foreman. And this is where Dad retired at Smoky Lake. That's quite a few years back now. Yeah, Dad retired here at Smoky Lake, and he lived on a farm just a mile south of town. My brother still has the property. And I had the ability those days to understand Ukrainian people, and it was often most amazing to me to hear them talk to their wives and suggest to them what they should ask the agent, thinking that I couldn't understand Ukrainian. So it is interesting for me to listen to the conversation, and somebody had come up to the wicket in broken Ukrainian, and I could know what they were talking about before they even come up to the wicket, and that was the interesting part of my life, is understanding foreign languages and coming up and trying to talk English at the station. Yeah, I started out at Smoky Lake, and then I started out after the war on the Northern Alberta Railways as an operator at Smith and McLennan, Peace River, Rycroft, Spirit River, all the way to Dawson Creek. That was the end of the Northern Alberta Railways at that time. From then on, I moved on to the Canadian Pacific Railway, working jobs from Nisku during the oil boom, and Leduc during the oil boom, and Wetaskiwin when everything was booming, and then on to Rocky Mountain House, and east all the way to Kerrobert, Camrose, south on the line to Kerrobert from Stettler, and then all the way south to Red Deer. That's about as far south as I worked, but it covered central and northern Alberta pretty well. In fact, all the way up to Waterways, which was the terminal there at that time. Now it's called Fort McMurray. Okay. Actually, the first position as stationed is the assistant agent, where you mostly handle the cleaning of the station and the loading of the express and freight. Then you moved up to telegrapher when you could qualify, and after you qualified as a telegrapher, you learned the station work and you moved on to the position of agent. And from agent, I actually moved on during my final years to a mobile supervisor, where they got rid of the agent, and I was a traveling station agent all over central and northern Alberta. Yeah, my dad was a section foreman, and he had to work all the cold, cold winter days and all the hot, hot summer days. And he often thought, if my son could get an inside job as a station agent, I would be the happiest section foreman in the world. So that's where Dad asked me to learn the station work so I would have an inside job instead of an outside job that he had to suffer through his 40 years. This is the entrance to the station waiting room, where you wanted to send your telegrams, wait for a train, or ship your express and freight. You always come in this door. Okay. This is our station platform truck. This is a little bit more modern because it has a rubber rim. The other ones were just steel. This is what we use to unload baggage, trunks, suitcases from the train for passengers detraining at Smoky Lake. And you had to have some pretty good grip on your shoes to pull this along like a donkey. If you couldn't pull it to the train, you asked for some help from the trainman, and they generally give you a push to help you get it to the baggage door where we unloaded the cream into the freight cars or the baggage cars. And on it went to Edmonton. And of course we took the baggage or eggs or whatever we had to load or unload at the various destinations along the line. In Smoky Lake, we had one passenger train each direction each day. We even handled the mail in those days. All the mail was delivered to the station.
This was a station agent's office. Everything was done from this
little.
little
Went to Edmonton for further
facility
sorting.
here.
On board the
Your
train,
customers
there
at
was
this
also
wicket.
got
A
your
mailman
train orders
who
over
sorted,
here and your telegrams
mail
over here,
between
stations here in
your
Bellis and all the way to
station
Vilna and
balance
St. Paul.
sheets and
So as
bookkeeping
the
was done
train
at
went
that
from
little desk.
different stations,
This is the kind of
the
desk
mail
that the
was
agent kept
delivered
his
on route
records
instead
in,
of it going by truck
record
out
of his
to
tickets,
Edmonton,
his
and
monthly
coming out 2 or 3 days later to
balance
come
sheet,
back to Vilna. We had
and
better
the record
service
of
in those days.
passengers.
Detrained, in-trained, and express delivered, and express accounting. This would be the shelves for all your telegraph forms, your station balance sheet forms, your passenger report forms, your express report forms. They were all in these little cubby holes here. That's where your different reports were filed. Each station generally had a little map that you could explain the different rail routes that crisscrossed Canada, both CN and CP. And as you sold tickets, each railroad that you had a ticket for had to have a separate coupon. So as you routed your passengers to Chicago, you routed them CPR as far as the border point, a different railroad to Chicago, a third railroad maybe to Chicago, to Des Moines. And if you went as far as Mexico, you even got into Mexican coupons for each different railroad. When you landed up with a ticket for a person to go into Mexico, you had landed up with a ticket that long with about 15 different coupons covering each different railroad going through every parts of the States and into Mexico. A station agent was a general agent not only for different railroads, but for different steamship companies going throughout the world, as well as airlines. When airlines come on, agents were given a blanket authority by the company to sell airline tickets, steamship tickets, and also railroad tickets, and Great Lakes transportation as well as the Great Lakes and Okanagan Lakes. We had separate coupons for transportation on various lakes in BC. The British or the steamship lines, Canadian Pacific, had their own Empress of Scotland, Empress of England, Empress of Britain. They were all the steamships that you could book passengers to Liverpool in England from Halifax, or other American lines, American steamship lines from New York to various places in France as well as to the Orient. We were agents for all airlines, all steamship lines, and all railroads. Getting a ride in a caboose is the joy of your life. A caboose was the office for the conductor operating the train. The conductor was the operator of the whole freight train. This is where he kept his records and kept his meals, because you stopped at various points and you had no cafe, so they made their own meals inside the caboose. They even slept in these things where there was no accommodation. They had accommodation bunks that they made up in cabooses. They bunked in overnight and made their meals there during the day and in the morning. This is the conductor's chair. He was able to view the back of the train as well as look out the side windows and see the whole length of the train. And you could see the whole train as it rounded the curve. You knew that everything was in order, that the wheels were still on the track. If the conductor pulled this cord, all the brakes would go on throughout the whole train. There were two bunks along this side here. They'd made up to benches during the day, and it was a removable bench from the bottoms where you could store your bed clothing, or a little bit of coal for the coal stove. This is a new version. And at night, when you wanted to sleep, if there was no accommodation over town, you would pull the bench and the back would drop off and you would have a full-sized bunk. There would be at least two and possibly three for the conductor. Usually there were 3 men in a caboose, a conductor and 2 brakemen. And this is where they would bed down for the night and rest up for their next trip. These cabooses that CN have, you don't have to reverse them because you have the same controls at each end and the same view at each end. Generally, this was a coal stove, and as years went by, they were converted to oil stoves. And this looks like an oil stove. Yeah. Generally, every caboose had an ice box where you got a chunk of ice leaving a terminal station, and you put a great big chunk of ice in there, and that kept your food cool during the day and the night, or during your whole trip. And there was a drainage bucket down below there, so the ice melted, kept it nice and cool, kept your eggs and your sausages from fermenting.
What was the job of the...
In charge of the train, he did the bookwork and give the instructions, and they generally had 2 brakemen on the train to do the manual switching, to sort out the cars. Grain went into one track. They were spotting elevator cars, so each elevator had a designation of 1 or 2, 3 cars to load grain. It would be up to the brakeman in this caboose to set the cars off at the various loading places for grain, or coal cars for unloading coal. They had different bins spotted along they called it the elevator track. Usually had the fertilizer plants, the oil plants. The gas was delivered in tank cars to the oil companies, Esso or Imperial Oil, and they had coal cars and lumber cars and various cars for unloading platforms, machinery, combines, tractors, and whatever. They were spotted at the platforms, and it was the work of the 2 brakemen to spot each car for each destination. Engineer, his duty was pulling the train like the driver. It was his duty to blow up all the air to make sure every car had its air brakes off, and then he had the control of the whole train for the various speeds and the various limits and the various slow orders. He had to observe all the slow orders, watch out for cows and trucks and cattle on the track. You had to blow at every whistle stop, every crossing, and warn the people, warn the cars, warn the cows. This is a beautiful caboose, and Smoky Lake should be proud of being able to retain one for Smoky Lake. Good job looking after it.